Welcome back, friends. It's your host, Nicole Burnett. Today, I am so honored to share the episode I just recorded with the incredible Avery Sullivan, and we are diving into the world of liberty horsemanship. Avery shares her unique insights and experiences on how giving your horse the freedom to choose can revolutionize your relationship and build a stronger bond based on trust and mutual respect. In this episode, you'll learn about the true essence of liberty horsemanship, what it really is, and why it's about more than just training techniques. This is about understanding and connecting with your horse on a deeper level. Avery discusses the importance of managing your own energy and emotions during training, which we are all about here at Resilient Reiner, and how doing so can positively influence your horse's behavior. So this is so tied in deeply with my own work. We also explore Avery's approach to working with horses and how this has impacted working with horses and helps them transform from fear into confidence through thoughtful, patient liberty training. She opens up about the ups and downs of the horsemanship journey and shares practical tips on how to mentally and emotionally reset when things aren't going as planned. I know you are going to get so much out of this conversation because she is a walking, talking case study of all of the mental things in action, all right? Managing yourself mentally and emotionally, and how that is so deeply entwined with your horse and their performance and your relationship. Oh my goodness. So whether you are new to liberty training or a seasoned competitive rider, I know that Avery's advice is going to inspire you to embrace this unique approach and discover the amazing benefits it can bring to you and your horse. We hear about what's next for Avery and her horses at Liberty and how you can start incorporating Liberty work into your own training plan, even if you're feeling a bit anxious or unsure about where to start. So sit back, relax, and get ready to transform your connection with your horse in a whole new way. And if you love this podcast, don't forget to please share it with a friend. If you hated this podcast, be sure to share it with your enemy, and go ahead and leave a 5-star review on iTunes with a little sentence about something that you've taken away from this podcast. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate all of you. Welcome to the Resilient Reiner, the premier podcast focused on mental performance for equestrians and improved horse show performance. Whether you're a rookie reiner or a seasoned competitor, this show is for riders who want to take their skills to the next level and achieve their full potential in the show ring. I'm Nicole Burnett, and I'm a master mindset coach who's obsessed with helping you achieve all those horse dreams you always thought were impossible. Join me each week to develop a show-ready mindset and gain the competitive edge you need to compete with confidence. Thank you for coming on. It's kind of just the magic of Instagram. I saw like one of your reels came up and I was like, oh, that is just the coolest thing. So
Thank you.
yeah.
We have fun.
Yeah, and I think people are really going to relate to a lot of what you're doing because there's so many people I know that I talk to that there are a lot of people who do enjoy competition, but there are a lot of people who kind of feel like they end up a little bit in the middle where they're like, I love horses, I love my horse, or, how does this work if I'm not trading my horse in and out to stay competitive, or I really want to bring back the joy, or I get that a lot with my clients where it'll naturally come up like their number one goal is really, I just want to bring back the joy to my riding and the joy to my time with horses and, focusing on that relationship. And so I think it's really cool to be able to share what you're doing and share just a different approach of spending how you spend your time with horses. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there should be a world in which you can have both because I love both
yeah.
pieces too. And yeah, and what can you just tell me a little bit? I looked at your page and stuff, but what is your primary focus and with your business and your podcast?
Yeah. So I try and tell a little story. So
Yeah.
I actually grew up doing 4-H and English writing, and I did dressage for a while. And then I've moved around a lot. And when I came to Utah is really when I got into reining, which I love. So I've been involved with a lot of different breeds, a lot of different geographical locations, a lot of
Mhm.
different disciplines. And one of the things that was really common for me was that I would go take a lesson and we'd be riding and we'd be working on our technical skills. And that'd be great. I'd be like, okay, I can feel the horse. I can do this. I can do whatever. But then I would go to a show, or there'd be a group lesson, or there'd be something a little bit different, right? Where I'm outside of a little hermit cave, or we go to the show and they'd be like, just ride like at home. And you're like, this is not like at home at all. Like,
Right.
stop lying to me.
This
Okay.
is terrible advice.
Like, nothing about this is like being at home at all.
Mhm.
And I just remember being so lost and so desperate for guidance and instruction of like, I don't want to come out of the arena and have you like sort of look at me, sort of not, and tell me to do better next time, or
Mhm.
just ride like at home, or like, you're like, I want the blueprint. I'm a great student. I want the instructions of how do I do better? How do I turn off this voice in my brain that is freaking out about everything? How do I warm up when this is absolutely not what I'm doing at home? Or I'm worried about if other people are judging me, or I'm having trouble focusing to do the writing techniques that we were training at home. So
Yeah.
that really kind of came about from me wanting to be able to help myself of how do I learn to focus on demand? How do I learn to become more confident, more mentally resilient? How do I learn to manage this mental thing? Because taking lessons on my horse or even putting my horse in full training, it's not solving what my real issue is, which is everything in my brain right now. So,
Yes, I totally get it and relate. Yeah.
yeah. So that's really what started it for me, is just the idea of don't send me your horse for training, but I'll absolutely help you work with your brain to
Yeah.
manage all that mental clutter and
Yeah. That's awesome. And I'm sure you have a lot of people that need help with that
yeah.
can't find it in other places.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really neat.
So I really enjoy it because it's made the biggest difference. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Is it mostly virtual that you do?
yeah, so I do Zoom sessions with clients, and then I have some online courses as well for people that want more of a self-paced option.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I will definitely keep that in mind when I'm talking to people.
Yeah. It's been really cool too to just see. I have a fair bit of international clients as well, which has been really neat. So people in Canada and South America. And so it's been really neat to just see that we're all so much more alike than we are different. Because again, I work with people in different disciplines. So barrel racers, reiners, team sorting, there's just all these different disciplines, and it's all still the same things that people are
Yeah,
struggling with. And so it's really good to, I think, just to create that community and a reminder that, hey, like, we're
we're
more
all in
alike.
it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. We're all in it together, and that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken, because it's so easy
right.
to be like, oh, there's something so wrong with me that I'm having this trouble.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's really neat.
Well, because it is more unusual what you do, can you
Mhm.
share a little bit about your background and how did you get started with Liberty training?
Yeah, so even just hearing you talk a little bit, there's a lot of similarities in I grew up doing a little bit of everything. So
Yeah.
I was in 4-H, I was, working with different breeds, different horses, and I did some English, I did some Western, I did some barrel racing, I did, a little bit of everything and just felt like I couldn't quite find like my niche.
Yeah.
I loved the horses and there was not a certain discipline that really grabbed me and made me want to be dedicated to it. And part of that was because a lot of times in the show world, you hit a point where, depending on the trainer you're working with, you have to do things that maybe you don't really want to do with your horse. Or, like you said, you have to upgrade your horse. And that wasn't really an option for me at the time. And so, I just kind of kept getting burnt out with different disciplines and feeling like either I wasn't good enough or my horse wasn't good enough. And so I ended up kind of just stepping back, and we were able at that point to move our horses home. So that was really cool. I'd always been boarding. And so I got to have them in my backyard, and I just spent a couple years really just enjoying them and trail riding and riding in the field and just working on stuff, kind of a lot lower pressure, and was a lot happier. And, so I was kind of not wanting to step back into anything else in that world. And then I had the barn owner that I used to board at, she reached out and she said, "Hey, we're having this clinician come out who does Liberty, and I think you'd really like it." And, at first I was like, I don't know, I'm sure I'd like it, but I've been to a lot of clinics and I can't say I have the best memories of them. And so I was a little hesitant, but she convinced me. And so I went, and that clinic was with Dan James of Double Dan Horsemanship. And so he's, very well known in the Liberty world and a great performer, great with his horses. And so I went there, and it was a 3-day clinic, and just after it, I was hooked. I was like, that was amazing. I don't know that I'll ever be able to do it again because it felt so complicated and so challenging through those 3 days, but I kind of just took it home and kept playing with it. And after that, he actually invited me to come down and intern that next summer. So I then went down to Kentucky to his place and learned even more, and ended up going back the year later and then staying for like a year and a half. So I got to learn a lot through that, and ended up doing, some training for him. And it was a great opportunity to just really increase my knowledge of Liberty. And that's when I really started doing more of the bridleless riding. And then from there, I actually met my now husband. We were both working there at the same time. And so he's from Texas. And so at the end of the trip, I ended up going back to Texas with him. And that was, gosh, now just about 3 years ago, 2.5, 3. And so from there, we worked with a lot of rescues and learned so much about Liberty and just how to be better, because, people will teach you great, but nothing will teach you like working with the horses, and especially the ones that know how to challenge you and force you to learn. And so that's really kind of the path that led me to what I do today in a brief nutshell, but it really all started with that clinic, and I'm glad I did it.
That's so neat. So, for listeners who are not familiar, how would you define Liberty training?
Yeah. So we get that question a lot, and for the like almost non-horsey people that we meet, I kind of compare it to dog agility. So I'm like, just picture like they're free, right? They're not connected, but you're asking them to work with you and play with you and do stuff with you, and you're engaging them. And, it's much deeper than that on the, once you get into it. But that's how I think of it with people that don't really maybe know as much about it. But really, to me, Liberty is about the connection with your horse. So we say, if you were to take your horse somewhere and you were to, go to a brand new place and you were to take it off the trailer and it had its horse best friend with it, they'd probably stick together, right? They might run around, but they'd stay with each other because they feel safe with each other. And so I want my horse to feel that same way with me when I go somewhere new. I want, and at home, I want them to feel like I'm part of your herd. I am going to keep you safe. I'm going to, we're going to work together as a team. You have a voice, I have a voice, and just want to build that. And, with all that we do, the foundation is always just the connection and having our horse then look at us as, yes, a leader, but also as a partner that will keep them safe.
Oh, that is amazing. So I hear you saying that really the core principle or kind of philosophy under all this is really the connection and relationship with the horse. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I think that's, at everything that we're working on, that's what we want. And a big piece of that also comes with, a lot of the horses that we work with have prior experiences that maybe aren't as great. And so a big part of that is also teaching them relaxation and self-relaxation, is that, with me, with this partnership, you can come down, you can be relaxed when we, face new things, when we feel pressure from the outside world or feel pressure from what we're working on, that it's okay. I almost want to connect with them mentally, not physically. And I want them to think through things and not just react through them as, as the animals they are, that sometimes they want to do.
Would you say that this is similar or different from more traditional training methods? Would you, or was it mostly just there's no halter, so that's it? Or how would you just describe that?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I think, we look at it as liberty to us is not like a single discipline, it's the foundation of all horsemanship.
Okay.
So to me, I look at liberty as whether I'm going to ride dressage, I'm going to work cows, I'm going to do reining, whatever I'm going to do, I want that connection with my horse,
Mhm.
right? I want them to think about me and to think about listening to me and checking in with me whenever we're doing something, whenever they feel something. And so to me, I think of it as it's that base. And once I get that base, then I can go do whatever I want and it's going to be even better because we're thinking together, we're working together as a team. And I think there's a lot of ways in which it's similar to a lot of different horsemanship, and there's a lot of ways in that it's different.
Mhm.
You can still work with getting connection with your horse, whether you're on a rope or not. There's certainly ways to do that, but I think it's almost the mindset of it's okay if you need to leave, or it's okay if you need to, share how you're feeling. Like, that's all right. You can express yourself, you can tell me when something's going on, and we'll work through it. And not being afraid to kind of really see how they truly feel and what they really need, and then help them through it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
can you walk us through, is there a typical Liberty session? Like, what would that look like, kind of start to finish?
Yeah. So it varies greatly depending on where our horses are at, but let's just say, we are going somewhere and we're helping someone who's never done Liberty before,
Yeah.
and this is their first session and they want to get introduced to it. We kind of break it down as simply as we can. And
Mhm.
step one is we need forward. So first, we just need our horse to understand that when we ask, I just need you to be able to move forward, right? Just kind of like a traditional round penning in that, trot off around the outside. And then we need them to go like one circle around us, just so they know that they can move their feet forward. Because
Mhm.
forward is the key to everything. And then we just ask them to change direction and go the other way. So make sure they know how to go forward both directions. And then after that, we ask them, we call it to draw their eye. So this is when we sometimes explain it. Let's say that you're, sitting having dinner at a restaurant, and all of a sudden you like feel something. And you look over and there's this like creepy person at the other side of the room and they're really staring at you. And even though they didn't say anything and there's no reason, like, you probably feel it and you can sense their energy, right? And so we almost become that to our horses. So I really look at them and I step
Mhm.
in the direction they're going and try and make my presence, my energy, like, hey, I'm here. And then as soon as my horse acknowledges me, I just step away.
Mhm.
And so as soon as we step away, all that pressure comes away. And they, just by that very, small moment and small piece, they then learn to think, oh, maybe I should pay attention to
Mhm.
what you're doing and what you're feeling. And so it kind of builds from that to then, when I take a step away, come with me. And another step away, come with me, and another step away. And then let's go a little faster. Now let's go to the trot. Now let's shape the forward and ask you to circle around me. And so from there, it builds and builds and builds. But the base of it all to us is draw, which is just that when I step away, are you thinking to come with me, to
Mhm.
not leave me?
Yeah. What are some of the most significant benefits that you've seen in horses who have undergone Liberty training?
Yeah. So we actually have a few examples of this. But so when we got to Texas and we were kind of thinking of our next steps, after we had been done working in Kentucky, my husband is a bit of a big idea guy. And so he came up with this idea that we would take in the toughest rescue horses we could find, from all across the country, and we would work with them just at Liberty and
Mhm.
see how they responded and where we could get them. And we set ourselves kind of a 4-month time frame. And at the end of that 4 months, we planned a little event where we, would show what they learned, and our goal was to have them also adoptable at that time because, they could not be adopted out at the state they were in. And those horses were the most dramatic stories for me, and it totally changed the way I view, liberty and also just horses in general.
Mhm.
And so One of the ones that we had come in, his name was Armani, and he was literally the most feral horse that I've ever met. I mean, if you just tried to step in the pen with him, he would try and just bolt out, like through the panels, anything he could. He would hurt himself just to get away from you. He wasn't aggressive, but he had so much fear with people. It was, heartbreaking to watch because he constantly lived in fear, and he held that every day in his body and his mind. And he was definitely the toughest one to get connection with. But at the end of that project, he was being ridden, and his first ride was bridleless, and he was continuing to being ridden bridleless. And now, 2.5 years later, he's actually been adopted out to this wonderful young woman who does children's lessons. And he currently works with kids that are just getting introduced to horses, and he does liberty and he does bridleless lessons, things that we would never have ever imagined. There were days where we were like, I just hope, somebody will be able to give you the home that you need, because we just really weren't sure if he'd be able to accept being in the human world the way we need them to be. And he blew us away in what he now is willing to do for these kids, and how he just takes care of everyone. And it's just so beautiful to see, because just the fear that he lived in before, we never would have thought he would end up there now. And so he's one of our favorite stories because it was just so dramatic. And then another one that I'll kind of just briefly talk about is, if you are following my page, you probably see Indigo, who's my little gray mare. And she's in a lot of the videos that I do. And so she was also in that rescue project. And she was one of the ones that I personally took on to work with. And she came in as she was 6 years old, and she had been at a very, well-run, knowledgeable rescue who had a trainer. They had been working with her since she came in as a yearling, and she had been feral at the time, but they'd gotten her going, done all her groundwork, but they had never been able to get to the point of riding her. And every time they would get up to the point of thinking about riding her, she would just buck and bolt away. So whenever the intention of riding came, she was not having it. And so eventually they were like, you know what, that's okay. If that's what you need, then we will just let you kind of be a pasture pet for now, and maybe we'll revisit it. We'll just see. And so she had kind of been sitting out in the field, and they applied, and we accepted her, and they brought her to us. And they had told us right then, if she's not rideable, if you don't ride her, that's totally fine. Like, I don't feel like you need to do whatever is right for both you guys and her, everyone's staying safe. And it was crazy because she held so much tension in her mind and her body. Like, she just wanted to bolt, not even, with everything on the ground. She just was always thinking, how can I get away from this? And after even just a couple weeks of doing Liberty, I was actually able to ride her for the first time. And that ride was also bridleless, and she handled it great. And from there, I continued working with her and continued bridleless. And she, very, very challenging. She's by far one of the most challenging horses I've ever worked with, but she also has taught me so much and blown me away in what she's willing to do, even with no force and with nothing on her head, and always kind of giving her the opportunity to say what she's feeling. And, sometimes she does have to listen, and it's not that we're overly let them do whatever they want, but, just her feeling like she had a say was enough for her to be like, okay, you can ride me and we'll work through this stuff together. And so she was a really neat story too, because she did have previous traditional, natural horsemanship handling, with people that were very knowledgeable and had worked with a lot of really challenging horses. And she was just one that wasn't willing to accept it that way. And for some reason, giving her that freedom to choose is what gave her the willingness to accept working with us.
That's just amazing. It's not horses, but it's really making me think of my own husband likes to use the phrase, I'm a volunteer, to remind me that he's a volunteer. Like, it could be something simple like, oh, will you, do the dishes? And basically kind of like, I'm a volunteer. Can you treat me
Yeah,
like, and so when you're talking about
I
all
love
of
that.
this, it's making me think of that for the horses, right? Like, I'm a volunteer. Like, can we do this in a more win-win kind of way? And
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really making me think of that a lot. So
I might use that. Yes.
I'm a volunteer. Please do. Yeah. Because it's, yeah, just that acknowledgement of it's not a total dictatorship.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think it applies to so many things in life that it's definitely opened my eyes to just by experiencing it with them.
Yeah. No, that is amazing. That is really cool. And I don't have experience with rescues in the same way that you do. I do have experience with Mustangs. And so that kind of allows me to touch on it in a little bit of the same way. That and then young horses, that idea of it's a big moment when they choose to be with you and when they choose to engage in what you're doing and they choose to want to participate in whatever your playtime or training is that day. And so I can just imagine for a horse that has had just a more intense experience or is really carrying that fear, that it makes such a huge difference when they choose to engage.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so true.
So when you're doing this, I guess personal curiosity, are you usually in a round pen with them in an arena? Like when I'm picturing this, what am I picturing?
Yeah, so again, it kind of depends on where the horse is at.
Mhm.
So when we first get started, we'll always say you can start Liberty in really any space that you want, but the bigger that space is, the better you got to be at running. Because the smaller it is, just the better I can be at my angles and at directing my energy. My horse can feel me a little bit easier. I can step in the right direction a little bit easier. And so, because of that, we like to start in something kind of round pen-ish sized and kind of to get that initial connection and get them understanding, just helps set them up for a little more success to get started. After they have a nice foundation and they're able to, usually when they can walk trot with us and just understand that concept, then we'll start coming up into the bigger spaces. And so at this point, with all of my horses that have been doing it for, at least a couple years at this point, we're always working in the full arena. So we'll have, just like we're riding, the arena will be totally open. And sometimes they do leave, and that's totally fine. And they go for a run and then they come back when they're ready and we go back to whatever we were doing. So I don't try and keep them in a small space because I want them to have that opportunity to leave, both because I think it's
Oh,
important for their mindset and also because it helps us when we go to new places. A lot of the times when we're going to events and stuff, it's big arenas and big facilities. And so we try to just work in those type of
mhm.
arenas as much as we can. And sometimes we'll even maybe go out in the field, if it's fenced in, and we'll work out there if we're doing something that we need that space. But primarily we're going to be in the arena with our horses.
That's really neat. When you said starting in the small space, it also made me think of that. I bet a lot of people are already doing something very similar, even if they're not thinking of it. Because what I'm thinking of is, let's say your horse even just lives in a stall. When you go to that stall, are you there at the stall door giving them the opportunity to turn and face you, to come to you, to join you? And you've got the halter, like, let's go. Are they coming to you and putting their nose in the halter, saying hello? Are they, turned away? Like that feels like a little microcosm of what you're talking about with liberty of, are they choosing to join you? It's very mental and mindset of, are we meeting each other? What's our attitude today? Like it feels like just a little mini
Yes.
moment of what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's so true. I do think a lot of people like don't even realize, but
Yeah.
that is the start of it. And we also, it's really neat because, when we do clinics and stuff, I can usually really tell the people who have had their horses for a while or have worked a lot with their horses,
Yeah.
because it's so cool to see how we might work with them and they'll do stuff for us and it'll be great. But then you can just see that dynamic shift when they're with that person that has been working with them, that they have that relationship with. And so it's really cool to see, like, they do appreciate that, understand it, and I think value those relationships sometimes more than we even realize.
Yeah. That's such a great reminder too. I can see that even with my couple horses where they really do take that relationship person to person is different. The way they'll interact with me is different than the way they'll interact like if my husband goes out or my kids go out. It's just so funny to see that they really do have those just person to person relationships they're all unique.
Yes, so unique.
Well, so how important is a rider's maybe not a rider, a handler's mindset when you're engaging in liberty training with your horse? Because this sounds like very much you got to be in the right frame of mind.
Yeah, yeah, I think, like all things that we do with our horses, the more I think grounded we can be, the more our horses appreciate it. I think the biggest things with liberty is not letting yourself get frustrated
Mm.
and looking at it like if they leave you, it's a good thing. It means that they're learning, right? If they leave you, you get to work through something today. You get to work on getting them back. And I can assure you from personal experience, it does not always feel that way. Once they're running around for however long, you're like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? But the more I try and get better at it every day, the more we can just think of it's okay. They're allowed to kind of do what they want, and that's an opportunity for us to educate them further, to help them work through it, to show them that running away is not the right answer, that we are here for them. And I think the more we can go into all of our sessions thinking, okay, it's all right, whatever happens, it's an opportunity to work through something, to learn something. I think it has helped. And I think doing Liberty has helped me think of that more like that because I really don't have the ability to force them, right? There are days where they are very long days and I don't have anything attached to them. So sometimes you just have to let them work through it. Yeah, and it's okay. That's what we got to do, and we do it. And then the next day they come out and it's a little bit better, and then it's a little bit better. And before you know it, that thing that was a big issue for them, it doesn't matter anymore because they truly worked through it on their own time and truly accepted it. And so I think that's the biggest mindset piece that I'll hear about, and I'll hear people saying, "Ah, but then my horse, left me, or they leave me when I do this." And like, it's okay. Our horses leave us too. Yeah, that means you're getting somewhere. That means you found a sticky spot that you need to work through. And that's good that you found it, and we'll help you get through it. So I think that's the biggest piece on the mindset that I think of.
Yeah. Well, do you have any preparation that you do? How do you prepare yourself mentally before you go into a training session like this?
Yeah, so most days I just think a little bit about what do I want to accomplish today, and then I go into my session, and sometimes I can work on what I've tried to accomplish, and sometimes I start something, I'm like, well, this is what we need to work on today, and we're going to adjust, and that's okay. And, that's really the biggest thing I'll just try and think about before I get started. But I've also learned from experience that sometimes I would go into a session, even though I could tell that I wasn't 100% in the best frame of mind, right?
Mhm.
Like maybe I'm frustrated from work or I'm overtired or, for some reason I'm just not fully there and fully able to stay in my best frame of mind. And in the past, I would just say, well, it doesn't matter. I have to work my horse and I'm going in there and we're both going to suffer through this and going to get something done.
That's about right. We'll both suffer through it is about how it goes.
Yeah, neither of us will feel better at the end, but I don't care. And so that's more what I would used to kind of think about because I was like, we have to get whatever our end goal is, we have to keep working on it.
Yeah.
And now sometimes, like, there are some days where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to work the horses today because I can just tell that it's just not going to work. Or, okay, you know what? I'm just going to go out. I'm going to do stuff that I know is really no problem, right? I'm just going to go do the things that is fun for both of us. That's not working on something new. That's not going to be something I need to be really focused on. And so I just try and be a little more aware of where am I at
Mhm.
and am I in the mentality where I'm totally game to open up, our next project, or do I need to just take a step back today and do something different, or do I need to just enjoy them and groom them, And so I try and get a little bit better about that and not just forcing myself through no matter how I feel.
And these are some really like if I abstract up a level, these are some really like amazing applications of everything that I talk about and work about, which is, for example, with your rescues, when you're talking about you had 4 months, but that was all about embracing the process, embracing the journey, trusting the process, really focusing on the process more than the outcome and letting
Mhm.
the outcome take care of itself. with when you're talking about approaching each session, there's a lot of adaptability, looking for, how do I need to adapt today? Because some days are going to be stretch days, some days are going to be just days for showing up and being consistent. So you're talking about that. You're talking about being really just focused and resilient and just a lot of the small improvements over time, because
Mhm.
that's such a big one. It doesn't matter if you're doing liberty training or under saddle stuff more traditionally, that you start something and you want it to be perfect right away. And it's really hard. It's hard when you're like, what do you mean there's a whole process? What? No, I want to
Yes.
throw my 1% improvement in the trash. So being able to say, yeah, we got a tiny bit better,
Hmm.
and being able to leave it. And I've heard it say, like, don't go through the good to find the bad.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, that's so, and I'm a perfectionist. Like, it's a
yeah,
blessing and a curse that, I would want it to be just how it needs to be. And
right now.
yes, yeah. And I'm always harder on myself and my horses than anyone else and anyone else's horses. And so sometimes I feel for my horses in that. And then I try to get better at it. And I try, and I think this has taught me, like, if you push through it and try to get more than you bargained for, in a session,
Yeah.
those horses, sometimes they're just like, "No, you gotta learn your lesson. Like, I'm not giving you anything." And
Yeah.
so I think learning to listen to them, it helps me be a little bit better at knowing when to quit. And
That's
and
such a skill. It is. Oh, it's such a fine line sometimes to figure out when is enough enough.
oh, it's hard. Even every day
Sounds
it's hard.
so easy, but it's not.
Mm.
Well, so one of the things I heard you say is to sometimes scale back. But let's say you start a session and you thought it was going to go one way, but it's kind of going the other way. So you're getting really frustrated. It's really challenging. What do you do in that moment to kind of reset yourself so that it
Yeah,
can
I
end
mean,
on a positive note? This is,
yes.
yeah. What would
It's
you do
always
in that kind of a moment?
easier said than done, as I'm sure we all know.
Yeah.
Um, I have had times where I've just been like, "Okay, I'm just gonna stop for a minute." Like, we're just gonna stop what I'm doing. And I'm just gonna make, sometimes I'll just like sit down on the ground, right, kneel on the ground and be like, okay, let's just calm down, take some deep breaths, like just come back down. Cause at that point, I know it's not my horse, right? When I have that feeling in me that like I'm frustrated, that emotion is coming into the session,
Yeah.
I know this isn't about what my horse isn't able to do or to comprehend. It's what I'm bringing here, and I'm making the situation worse. And so there are some times where I feel totally calm, I feel good, but the horse is struggling. And in those moments, I'm like, that's okay. I know you're struggling and I know this is hard, but I'm going to help you push through it. And you're going to come on the other side, more confident. You're going to understand it's going to be okay. And I think knowing the difference between those two situations, and when it is that I feel good, then we're going to just keep working through it. And we're going to keep working through it until we find some little good note to end on, right? Again, not perfect, but something that is improvement, right? Even if it's a 1% improvement from where we started, I just want to find some place to improve. And if I have to adjust a little bit, to step back what my first goal was at the start of the session, if I have to accept a little bit less, if I have to do something, adjust my approach to support my horse a little bit better, I'll try and think of those things and just be conscious of, okay, how can I help you, but also encourage you to work through when you're feeling this. And on the other hand, when it's me that's gotten to that point where I'm overwhelmed and just too emotional, because energy is good, energy is no problem. But when emotion becomes into energy, I think that's when we get in trouble, because then it feels stronger. We're not as good at our releases. It's the horses can tell, they know when we're tense, they know how we feel. And when I feel that, that's when I try and just take a step back. And as much as I always want to end on a good note, there have been times where I've been like, okay, let me get to good enough and I'm just gonna step out for a minute.
Yeah. No, I
Yes.
love to hear you say that because I think it's kind of one of those, like, I don't know, say the quiet part out loud moments where sometimes you just stop. Maybe it's a terrible moment in your training. Maybe they just did something bad or wrong, or it was a step backwards, but it's better to just stop
Mhm.
stop digging the hole. And like, even if you just come back tomorrow, but it's like the hole's only a foot deep, it's not like 10 feet, right? Because I think that it takes a lot of humility in the best way to be like, I'm not going to fix this right now, so I'm at least not going to make it worse. Because
Yeah,
I think we
that's
can
so true.
all relate to that.
Yeah, and we have even, have people that will come for help on something, and I always so appreciate the people that are like, "Look, I tried this one time and X, Y, and Z happened," and I was like, "I don't know what to do." So I stopped. And I was like, "That's great. It's okay." If you don't know how to get to the good note, don't keep pushing
Yeah.
because you're probably not going to get to it. If you feel confident that okay, I this is part of it. We're going to get through it. I know how to get you there. Then we keep pushing. But there are times, like you said, where you got to be like, yeah, it's just going to dig deeper and deeper. And I'm not going to know how to handle that.
I'm glad you share that because I know those are not the stories I think we probably share as much with our friends where you're like, you want to call and be like, we had such a breakthrough. It was amazing. You don't call and be like, I was starting to lose my marbles and then I just walked away when I had a tantrum. Like, maybe that's over dramatized, but yeah.
Yes, it's very true. We want to share the highlights and the good moments. And I try to, as much as the highlights are good, also be real of it's not always good and it's okay.
Well, so one of the things that is, I know in my work, because I see a lot, is that the mental and emotional state of the rider is reflected in the horse and that it's related. And so that's a big deal and partly why it matters so much to master your mindset so that you can be focused and calm and confident. And if you think of it like tuning forks, have you ever heard that? Like where if you do two tuning forks but you can only keep one frequency.
Oh, no, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, so imagine I'm a tuning fork.
Yeah.
But if you have two different frequencies going, my sister's also a singer, so I think this is
Okay.
kind of a reference. But you hit a tuning fork, it's making a pitch. You hit another tuning fork. I'm probably using all the wrong words, but it's making a different frequency. Like, I'm sorry, Gabriella.
I'll
Um,
never know, so it's okay.
so they're making two different ones, but you can only keep one. And
Mhm.
so they'll duke it out until you get one frequency. And so you can think of it similarly with emotions, right?
Mhm.
Like because you can think of it with your horse, but you can even think of it with your family. Like, let's say you had a great day, but your husband got, I don't know, pulled over for speeding on the way home.
Mhm.
And then he comes in the door, and then one of you's having a great day, one of you's like all dark and stormy. Well, that's not going to continue, is it? Either he's going to join you being happy or you're
Mhm.
going to join him in a foul mood.
Yeah.
I feel like that's got to be amplified in any sort of liberty work. So, how do you feel like writers can use this to help them improve their relationship with their horse and their training sessions?
Yeah, I love that example, and that is so true. Is very often when we come into the round pen, especially when we're first getting our horses, working on this, we are not the same frequency pitch, right? And my goal is to get them to come to whatever mine is. And I think the same thing happens when, let's say it is one of my more seasoned horses, but we go to a new place and it's a big environment. Like it's same thing. And often I feel the same way in that environment, right? I'm like, this is scary. We're gonna have to go in front of people soon. And yeah, I want to go with you with your frequency. I'm feeling that's more accurate, but I've got to try and get myself to a more confident moment and bring you there with me. And I think that the biggest way that it helps is it makes us more aware of it. Like I'm not just gonna go somewhere, hop on my horse and battle it out up there between myself and my horse. I'm gonna try and check in first and just be able to tell because even, I can't always go somewhere and do liberty because sometimes there's not a pen available and I need to keep them connected to me, but I can use those same concepts of, okay, you are not with me. I can tell. You're looking everywhere, you're whinnying, you're not focused. So let's do what we would do at home, but with the rope. Let's work together. Let's get your energy up. I'll come up with you, and now let's come back down. And let's do it again. And I keep doing that until they're thinking connect with me, that it's better to pay attention to me. And that's how it's helped me, when we find those moments. It's great when we can work through it totally free, but it also has just made me more aware of, okay, when we can't, we can still see each other and know where we're at and figure out a plan to get there without getting ourselves in more of a bad situation because I'm just trying to ignore it.
Yeah. The ostrich approach is a classic.
Yeah, I've done it, so I get it.
Oh, well, I can see that. I mean, you mentioned going to a new place, but I would see it would be pretty natural for someone who is curious to try something like this with their horse, and they just feel that anxiety or stress get really heightened when they work their horses at liberty. Do you have any advice for riders that might in that situation?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is I would say you can't mess it up. This is not something like, there are higher level maneuvers and things that you got to be so specific with. And you do kind of get worried that you're not going to ask it right and you're going to create a situation. But liberty at its base, there are so many different ways to approach it. There are so many different ways to do it. It's about finding that connection with your horse and just go out and play with them, right? Don't feel like this has to be perfect because it doesn't. And we always say to people who are worried, like, it's really okay. If something's not going right, they're just going to leave. Like, that's okay. There's a lot worse things. And then they'll come back and then you'll figure that out. And so, I would say if you can feel like this is just a fun, happy thing, that it is not something you need to work on, something you need to do exactly right, because it's not. Everybody is a little bit different in the way that they interact with their horse, and liberty is about embracing that and adjusting to your horse. We even approach the way we work different horses differently because some of them need more energy. They need us to come up, and some of them are so sensitive they need us to be that really grounded, calm, low energy. And that's okay. It's all a little bit different. So I would just encourage people to just think of it as fun and don't be afraid that you're going to do something wrong because it's all going to be okay. It's at its root. It is simply being with your horse.
Yeah. And everybody, like I said, I get a lot of people who are looking to bring more joy and fun back to their riding. And so I think this sounds like a really fun way to just add fun back in to your time with your horse.
It's so true. It's like, that's why we say it doesn't matter what you do. Even if your liberty is that it's 5 minutes a couple times a week, or it's once a month when you're just like, I just want to do something that's not high pressure. It can be as advanced as you want it to be, or it can be just the way to connect with your horse and have fun on those days where maybe you want it to be low pressure.
Do you find that it helps you to be a more effective rider without, I guess if you ever, I don't know if you ever use more, bridles and tack as well, having done the work at Liberty?
Yeah. So my personal horses, I don't ride with bridles, just because we're kind of just seeing how far we can take it without it. But I do certainly ride with bridles on other horses and have had, that's how I grew up riding. And I did find a huge difference. And the biggest thing was that I realized how much I was micromanaging. And even when I was like, I'm not doing anything, like my hands are still, but they weren't because there was still contact, there was still tension, there was still, my pinky moving, and I was still doing so much more than I realized. And when I let go and I didn't have that, and they still were listening to me and listening better often, I was like, wow, I
Were
was
you
doing
annoyed when I was messing with you all the time? Oh.
yes, I'm sorry I'm type A and wanted it perfect, but we can
Yeah.
get there without me doing all this. And so it's just made me so much better at, we always say it comes from your seat and your legs first, right? It comes like that is the first cue with everything. And I always thought I was doing that, but I was kind of doing it, but not fully, right? I wasn't really letting them you give them the time to make that answer and to learn it. And I've gotten so much better through this at really actually using my seat, my body, and using my hands last and using them less, and better at teaching my horse body control without always having to have contact, always having to ask them, being able to just get them softer with less. And whether we have some people we work with who don't necessarily want to ride bridleless and aren't comfortable taking the bridle off, but they really like having that neck rope on
Mhm.
and dropping their reins and just working on stuff because it gives them that way to kind of have that almost like, oh, yep, here's the spot where I maybe was doing a little too much because my horse doesn't understand my cues from my legs and my body. And so I need to work on that. And so I think it can really help show you where those holes are and how to be just better at letting our horses do a little bit more themselves.
Yeah. One of the things that I really liked about when I switched to Western was the idea of doing less, right? That it's supposed, seat and legs. My hand is just, I don't know, an accessory practically. But it was
Yes.
really hard to do less. And it's amazing when I do less that the horse is happier and they're doing great. And I feel like it really challenged me to actually step up in my training because if I can not micromanage, I'm really actually working more on true collection, on lifting from the back, lifting from the withers. Why am I messing with their face? Because there's really no point. It doesn't matter. I don't
Yeah.
care about where the nose is. I care about, or is their back lifted, or is the withers up? Like all these other things that have nothing to do with my hands. And
Yeah.
so I think that there's a lot that even just regular performance horse riders can take away from Liberty as well in terms of you don't have to do it every single ride, but check in, like use it as a fun experiment. Like, how's it going? Do you catch yourself? I know that there are times that I definitely have caught myself wanting to mess with things. Like I'll literally, for like a cross training thing, I'll trail ride sometimes in just a halter and lead rope. And it's a similar kind of thing where for no good reason at all, I'm going to want to get in there and mess with things. Instead of, it's great practice for me as a rider, training that muscle memory of keep my hand down. You don't need to be doing anything right now. And you're like, oh, I mean, I know that, but it's a great practice for.
Yeah, that is so true. And that's one of the things I love about reining is how the focus really is your horse is with you and your hand really is ideally an accessory at those higher levels. And I think a lot of the times the horses that are trained in reining, they pick this up so quick because they're like, yeah, I got this. I know how to do this.
Yeah.
And and even the horses that maybe aren't trained that way, we also find people are always afraid, okay, if I let go, even if it's just letting go of the reins, like what's gonna happen? They're gonna bolt, they're gonna like panic, right? It's gonna be horrible. And 99.9% of the time, it's the opposite. They relax, they lower, they soften, they're more agreeable because they're like, okay, I
Oh,
got it. I know how to do this. Yeah, if you do a little less, I got you. And so I think that's been a cool thing to see is that, yeah, we just like to hold on.
and just that experience, I think you talked to so much about the connection and the relationship with that horse. Even just a little moment of dropping your reins and then riding your horse, that's
Mhm.
building that connection. That's building that trust and relationship because you're only worried about it because you have a little mental script playing in your background anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it seems like a perfect chance to ask you, what are some common misconceptions that you run into that people have about Liberty training?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest ones is that like it's a performance
Hmm.
and it's a trick,
Yeah.
right? And that's how I grew up learning about it. It's Liberty was a part of the evening shows, it was part of the movies. It's this really cool flowery thing that high level professionals and, fancy Andalusians and that type do. And it's not really attainable to me. And even if it was, like, what is the point? And I find now that that's so far from the truth that the performances are fun and I love, working towards them, but they are a tiny little piece of it. And what really the power of Liberty is the peace of mind, the connection, the power that gives my horse and I to work together. That's what it is that I want to get out from that. And that's what, I wish more people could see is that it's not about the fancy tricks. They're cool, but that's not the foundation for us. And that's not why we're so passionate about it and why we try to spread it. It's because of what it has the ability to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that we'll hear, from people, whether in the industry or not.
What are your goals or aspirations as you continue to work with your horses at Liberty?
Yeah, that's a fun one. I am a very goal-oriented person and always have stuff I'm working on. So our biggest thing, right now is between Patrick, my husband, and I, we have 6 horses, and all of them, all but one is a rescue, are rescues, and the one that's not a rescue kind of had his own mental baggage anyway, so he gets thrown in there. But we've been working with them on doing like a 6 horse Liberty team, and they've done some different sessions, and that has been so much fun and so cool to see because they're all different sizes and shapes, and they all have different stories, and none of them would be horses you would expect to get to those higher levels, of Liberty, and yet they are, and they're loving it. And so one of our goals is to really get them going and to be able to share their story with more people because of the Liberty piece, but also because of the rescue piece, and because they're not fancy, and they didn't start out with the situations in which they would have the best life, and yet they powered through, and they did get that. And so that's a really big piece that we're working on and having a lot of fun with. And then personally, I'm really enjoying working on seeing how far I can go with the bridleless. So when I first started, I was like, well, I'm just gonna, I want to do the first ride bridleless, and I want to do a little bit bridleless, and eventually I'll put the bridle back on and I'll do my more advanced stuff with that. And I just kind of kept going, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna put it on. I'm not gonna put it on. And then I just hit this point where I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna put it on at all. And I wasn't really sure because this was my first time really teaching a horse more advanced stuff without it. I was like, I don't know how far we're going to get. We'll see. And I've been amazed to see we've been able to figure out, and not really any slower than the times that I've done it, with the bridle. And so I think another huge piece is really just showing that, but again, like you said, whether it's bridleless or not, how much we can teach our horses when we do less, and how much they can do, and how much fun it can be when we're just more focused on trying to communicate and not trying to push.
No. Oh, that's really fun. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
excited to see how far you guys can go too with the
Thank you.
bridleless, and it feels fun, and I love that. And I think it'll be really neat too, just because there's so much more to horses in their lives than the window when they're at peak physical condition, right? When they're young horses, because honestly, like not everybody has the opportunity. Not every horse is, on a 50-acre field until they're started under saddle. And so, what's something you can do with the young horse? What's something you can do with the retired horse? What's something that you can do with a horse that's on injury rehab? All of these things that are so good for their mind and body, and ways to care for them and have that relationship that aren't just under saddle work, because there's just a whole bunch to the horse's life that is not just performance work.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we meet a lot of people who just like that have horses that maybe aren't rideable anymore, or maybe they weren't rideable, or maybe those people don't really want to ride, or they can't ride. We'll meet a lot of people like that, and they feel like, well, what do I do? I can do a little groundwork, but there's only so much before it starts to feel really repetitive. And so we found that for those horses, for those people, this is an avenue that just gives so much back to their relationship, and gives them the ability to set goals, to work on things, to really start to feel again like there is no limit. We have so many more things that we can work on and we can build together. And I think is a great avenue for just those situations that you talk about.
Right. If you could give one piece of advice to someone looking to deepen their connection with their horse, what would it be?
Gosh. I think that I would say just don't be afraid to just get started, to get out there and to listen, even if you don't really like what you're hearing, whether it's from yourself or your horse. And then whatever you find from that, just don't be afraid to get help. We all do so much better when we collaborate, when we learn from each other, and when we get support, just like our horses need it, we need it too. And so I think that's another thing when you're working on something new, is there's so many amazing resources out there, and to ways to get started. But at the end of the day, no matter what, it's fun, and just use it as a way to have fun and see where it takes you from there.
Do you have any questions that you wish that I would ask you?
Not really. I mean, that was great. I think that, yeah, you do a great job of organizing that, and I think it really hit the main topics, and I think there's not anything off the top of my head that I would think of. So yeah, thank
Well,
you for well organized.
yeah, no, I'm just so excited. I just think what you're doing is really cool, really awesome, and I'm really excited to share that with people. I just think there's so much we can learn from it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I love what you are doing here too. And I wish that I had known about it when I was in the show world, because I was that girl trying to chew gum and sing songs in her head, anything to just not have a
Yeah.
little meltdown.
Well, how can people, if they want to follow along and see more of what you're doing, how can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm probably most active on my Instagram, where you found me, misfit_mayors. I'm on Facebook too. And then we also run a nonprofit called Gamilah Unbridled. And that is where we'll share a lot of the different, learning opportunities that we do, the different places that we visit, both nonprofits and different farms that we'll do clinics at. So that's another great place to just check out if you want to see if we're coming in your area.
Mila?
Gamilah, yeah, it's
Amila.
Gamilah, and then
Okay.
Unbridled. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been my pleasure. Thank you for taking time to come on and just talk with me today.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it, and you make it so easy and natural.
Good. Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to meet you.
Thank you. You too. I'm sure we'll talk again.
I hope so. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast today. Make sure you grab my free masterclass on what you need to develop your unshakable confidence as a rider to start crushing your goals in no time. Links in the show notes. I can't wait to continue this journey together, because when we support each other, there's nothing you can't achieve. Happy trails.